Hi there. Well, using my previous format, I'm going to try and give you what I can of a summary synopsis of books 17 through 24. Uh, there's a lot going on in these books, and I'm really hoping that you can supplement this video with your own reading of summaries and even commentaries to figure out what exactly is happening and what the meaning is. So we will start with book 17. Remember that book 16 was a turning point and Patroclus was killed. Book 17 is the War for Patroclus. So that's the title I'm giving it. Now, one thing that you see immediately in book 17 is that Menelaus takes Patroclus's death very hard. Now, you can understand this because Menelaus is the reason that this war is happening. Married to Helen, he was betrayed by his guest, Paris, and because his wife was taken, all the other Greek kings had sworn allegiance to him, and so, including Agamemnon, who's his brother, and because of their allegiance, they all joined together. It's said that, Helen's face launched 1,000 ships. And so Menelaus, I think, really sees that this is because of him. It's because of his domestic problems. And so, one thing that's happening is this realization that a Greek's body is precious. And one of the things that the Greeks believed is that the body had to be buried in order for the soul to be free. And so the soul would roam kind of aimlessly if the body wasn't properly buried. This comes up in the Odyssey. It comes up in the Oedipus plays. So, again, Menelaus is one of those who's guarding the body of Patroclus. And the reason this is happening is because Patroclus was so overextended that his army had to pull back when he was killed, and that left his body there to be claimed by the Trojans. But this is an incredible act of heroism. Menelaus and the others basically, they protect Patroclus's body so that it can be taken back for burial. Now, there's a miniature war for the body of Patroclus, and remember that armor was huge, not just because of its practical use, but because of the symbolism that went with it. When you claimed the armor, you claimed almost the soul of that hero. Well, Glaucus is a character that's interesting because Glaucus and Sarpedon have had some exchanges. Sarpedon was the son of Zeus, and Glaucus basically shames Hector, scolds him, and that shows that Hector isn't universally appreciated. Remember that he has kind of gone back and forth in terms of what he is supposed to do. And he is concerned about his wife and child back home, as the other soldiers are. But Glaucus, I think, is questioning where his loyalties are. In this book, you see that gods on both sides are manipulating the outcome, or at least the flow of the war. And Apollo is on the Trojan side, Athena on the Greek side, and they're just going back and forth and back and forth. Now, Menelaus, toward the end of this book, he sends a message to Achilles through Antilochus. Remember, Antilochus is the son of Nestor. And so the message goes to Achilles, and basically the message is, we can't win without you. And that's an act of humility, again. So everything's kind of moving quickly toward climax of the book, of the text, the Iliad. So book 18, the A-Team makes ready. Now, if you know the A-Team from the 80s, and I'm not talking about the remake movie, which I never even saw. I'm sure it had its moments. Liam Neeson was in it, for Pete's sake. So anyway, the A-Team was legendary for these scenes where you have these preparations. You have like hands reaching for tools. And that's what I think of when I read book 18, that things are being made ready for the final push of this war. And it's, Achilles is at the center of it all. Achilles has premonitions. He probably has his whole life. Now, the story of Achilles, remember, his mother had the oracle tell her that her son was doomed. And so she tried to save him by dipping him in the river Styx, but she held on to his ankle, his Achilles heel, and as a result, he was protected except for that one spot on his body. But Achilles has these premonitions, and he basically knows that he is going to die. He's destined to die if he stays at Troy. And there's always this idea, well, he could leave and go back to Greece, and he would survive. Or if he stays in Troy, he'll be remembered forever, even though he dies. Achilles is devastated by Patroclus' death, and his mother, she feels his pain. And this is very significant because she's kind of the go-between between the mortals, Achilles, half gods. She goes between the mortals and Zeus, and Zeus loves her. So basically, that's been, all along part of the relationship. But Hephaestus, son of Zeus, also has a relationship with Thetis. And so she is able to go to Hephaestus and get him to make special armor for Achilles. Remember, he's no longer got his armor because Patroclus had it on. And so this is, you remember, Hephaestus is kind of like the forgeman of the gods. He's the craftsman of the gods. And the things that he makes are utterly incredible. There are even descriptions of robots in the Iliad. And so just, realize that his power, he's crippled. The backstory is quite sad, really. And he is actually married to Venus, but she cheats on him. So, Aphrodite. And so Hephaestus is a central figure here because he's going to create this armor that will turn the tide. And so basically, Thetis returns with the armor, and before nightfall, Achilles is going to turn the battle, and he's going to go get the body back, right? Well, in book 19 is called Armor Arrives. So the weapons and armor arrive, and Achilles and Agamemnon basically call a truce. This is really the key moment. They call a truce. It has to do with this loss that Achilles has experienced, and you see this play out at Patroclus' funeral, that Achilles actually gives Agamemnon one of the main jobs, which is to light the funeral pyre. It doesn't light right away, but fortunately Iris, the messenger of the gods, helps to light it. So, how do they come to a truce? Basically, they blame the girl, saying Artemis should have shot her. And it's really sad because obviously there's incredible misogyny here, gender bias, and it's a part of the Greek culture. There's a double standard for men and women. Women are generally treated as property, although we see glimpses where characters like Helen, Hera, Athena, they do rise beyond the stereotypes and the blame that is the lot of women in this book and culture. So, Odysseus is the one who is always wily. That's what he's known for. And so in the sequel, the Odyssey, he's constantly kind of pitting his wits against the gods. Those are the gods, or the gods' offspring, like the Cyclops. So Odysseus wants Achilles to be reconciled with Agamemnon, and most of all, very practically, he wants Achilles to eat so that he can be strong for battle. But Achilles refuses, he fasts. So finally, Athena basically has to force feed Achilles the nectar and ambrosia while he's sleeping. When Achilles, goes out, then you have this fascinating episode when Patroclus's horses speak to Achilles, and basically, Achilles is accusing the horses of not doing their part to save Patroclus. But the horses stop and they turn and they talk to Achilles saying, it's not our fault that Patroclus died. Oh, and by the way, you're going to die. And this is very reminiscent of the biblical story of Balaam and the donkey. And I just think it's fascinating that you have this kind of an episode where the horses are talking. Okay? Book 20, The Gods' Games. Well, everything comes down to sports, right? And there is a huge assembly of the gods, and basically Zeus is changing his tune a little bit and says, okay, we're going to have a free-for-all. And the games of the gods are unleashed. And, page 388, it says, with these words, Zeus unleashed the war. And this is fascinating because it's almost like they've been just itching to get into this war, and now they have sanction to do that. And so their fighting of each other is mirroring the fighting of the mortals, the Athenians, or the Greeks, the Achaeans, not Athenians yet, but Achaeans and the Trojans. So a couple things happen here. Scamander, you know Newt Scamander, right, from the Fantastic Beasts, Harry Potter, and also the Simois. Those are two rivers, and they're gods. Remember, these are earth deities, chthonic deities. They're river gods, and they play an important part finally. They've been the borders of this war, but now they actually get involved. Another thing that happens is Achilles faces off with Aeneas. And Aeneas is no match for Achilles. He's great, and he will be the one that the story of the Trojans continues with in the Aeneid, which is a Roman epic. And it's all about how Aeneas, after Troy falls, sorry, spoiler, he leads a group of refugees to found Rome. Well, Poseidon saves Aeneas at the last minute, and so he goes on to fight another day. Now, Apollo and the other gods, they're trying to get Hector not to do something stupid and not to challenge Achilles, because Achilles is just simply a war machine. And we've had this buildup throughout the book, even though Achilles hasn't been doing anything. We're thinking, okay, this is weird. Everybody is talking about Achilles, and yet you have all these other heroes. So Achilles is just simply head and shoulders beyond any of these other heroes. And so Apollo says to Hector, don't challenge Achilles. Just don't do it. Resist temptation. And you can, when this happens, when in a Greek myth, if they say something like this, usually the characters are going to mess up and they're going to do exactly what they're not supposed to do. And so basically Achilles is just slaughtering people. He's killing most of the sons of Priam, who is the king of Troy. And, just know that Hector and Paris are both sons of Priam. Aeneas is not. Aeneas is kind of an attached ally, so not the same as the princes of Troy. Well, Achilles just seems invincible. Even though Apollo has saved Hector, Achilles is just taking control. Book 21, The River's Revenge. So Achilles is just hacking and slashing through people, and they're running from him, they're fleeing. And then the river gets involved. The Xanthus River is the Scamander. It's got two names. And it's filled with all these dead Trojans and chariots and horses and bodies, reminiscent of the flood in Exodus, the Egyptians. And basically, Achilles kills another son of Priam. And anybody who calls for mercy, he just ignores it. Remember, he's fueled by his rage, his desire for vengeance for his close friend. And finally, he's wading through the river, and the river itself says, stop it, or I'm going to get involved. Achilles refuses to listen, and the river actually attacks Achilles. And this is the first time you see that Achilles is actually frightened, and he's running from the surge of the river. Achilles has killed, in the process, a son of a river god. And so, even though Xanthus has appealed for him to stop, it's not doing any good. So how does Achilles get saved from the river, which is just more powerful than him? I mean, this is unearthly, supernatural. And so Poseidon and Athena are the ones who support Achilles and save his behind, basically. Now, Hera finally stops the river. Okay, this is an intense scene, and Hera stops the river with Hephaestus's help. Hephaestus is in charge of the fires. That's why, his name is Vulcan, and that's where we get volcano. So he is filled with fire, and he uses the fire to put out the river, the opposite of what you usually think, water putting out fire. So Athena schools Ares and Aphrodite. Okay, she's just a dominant warrior, and these other gods are no match for her. And remember, Athena is fighting for the Greeks. And Poseidon then challenges Apollo, and Apollo just kind of oddly bows out. Hera then basically makes Artemis look foolish and rips her bow away from him. Remember, Artemis is a child of one of Zeus's affairs, so she hates these extra children of Zeus. The Trojans then, they realize they're really in trouble now, and they retreat into the city. And that's when Apollo tricks Achilles, okay? He keeps running around the city, and Achilles keeps chasing him, and Achilles thinks that it's Hector, but it's not Hector. Book 22, a giant falls. Well, Achilles figured out what Apollo was doing, and then he headed straight for the gates of Troy and Hector. Hector is wise enough to have listened to Apollo's advice. He's not going to fight by himself. But then Athena tricks Hector, pretending to be Deiphobus, who is the brother of Hector, and says, "I'll fight with you." And Hector goes out, and then Athena disappears. And Hector is all alone, and he is doomed. He knows it. He still goes down fighting with his words, and Priam, his father, is watching, and Hecuba, they're watching from the ramparts. They can see that Hector is doomed. And there are these long monologues about how human existence is fleeting. And these are powerful poetry. If you want to, analyze one of those monologues, it might be a good idea. And so there are a couple of instances where it's kind of interesting, where the characters are talking to themselves. Hector does it once, and Agenor is another character who says, "Why am I talking to myself?" So it's just a very interesting human little side. Achilles closes in on Hector. He's chasing Hector around the city. Hector's getting worn out. Athena breaks the stalemate by getting Zeus to relent. And that's when she pretends that she is Deiphobus and gets Hector to fight Achilles. But he's doomed, and he's hit in his neck, right where he's vulnerable. Achilles is able to get him, and he is defiant to the very end and says, "So this is Achilles," as if Achilles has no honor in this situation. Remember, Hector has been fighting for his family and his child. It's a different situation from Achilles. And then his body is defiled, and all of the family members are watching this happen, and they realize the defilement of the body and the worst thing that can happen to a Greek.